Have you ever been pushed to the edge, judged not for who you are, but for the struggles you carry? Imagine standing in front of people who see only your flaws and none of your fight. That's exactly what happened to Daniel, a single father who was just trying to keep a roof over his little daughter's head until one encounter with a cold-hearted manager changed everything. But what the manager didn't know was that the CEO himself would soon walk through those same doors. And when he did, everything turned upside down. Stay with me till the end, because this is a story of love, survival, and how kindness can come from the most unexpected places. Daniel adjusted the small backpack on his daughter Emma's shoulders, her tiny fingers curled around his hand as they walked into the luxury apartment complex. To anyone passing by, he looked out of place. His shoes were worn, his jacket was faded, and his tired eyes told a story of sleepless nights spent juggling two jobs, but none of that mattered to him. All he cared about was Emma, her bright smile, her laughter, and the promise he had made to her late mother. I'll protect her, always. Today, Daniel had come to speak with the building manager about renewing his lease. Rent had gone up again and he didn't know how he was going to manage it. Still, he hoped if he explained his situation, showed his dedication as a tenant, maybe they'd work something out. Inside the gleaming lobby, the marble floors reflected the chandeliers overhead. Emma's eyes lit up as she gazed around. "Daddy, it's so shiny here," she whispered. Daniel smiled weakly, but in his chest, dread pressed down heavier than any weight he'd ever carried. The manager, Ms. Phillips, stood behind the counter, her sharp suit immaculate, her lips painted in a perfect shade of red. She looked Daniel up and down the way one might inspect a stain on their carpet. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice crisp, "your lease renewal is overdue. If you can't pay the new rate, I'm afraid you'll need to vacate by the end of the week." Daniel swallowed hard. "Please, I just need a little more time. I'm working double shifts, and I always pay what I owe." "My daughter," she cut him off with a dismissive wave. "This isn't a charity, Mr. Carter. Rules are rules. I suggest you start packing." Emma's little face fell. She tugged on her father's sleeve, whispering, "Daddy, are we going to lose our home?" His heart cracked at the fear in her voice. He crouched down to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No, baby. I won't let that happen." But inside, he wondered if he was making a promise he couldn't keep. The next few days were a blur of exhaustion and worrying. Daniel worked until his hands blistered, picking up every shift he could at the warehouse, only to come home and help Emma with her homework. Each night, he tried to hide the stress in his eyes, but children can see through things adults wish they couldn't. Emma had started slipping drawings under his pillow, pictures of their small apartment with the sun shining above it, and always the words, "Me and Daddy forever." One evening, after another 12-hour shift, Daniel came home to find a notice taped to his door, "Final warning, vacate or be removed." His chest tightened, and he sat down hard on the hallway floor, the paper trembling in his hands. Emma came out in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed bunny. She sat next to him, leaning her head on his arm. "Don't cry, Daddy," she whispered, "maybe someone will help us." The next morning, Daniel made the decision to plead one more time. He marched into the manager's office with Emma by his side. "Please," he said, his voice breaking despite his efforts to stay strong. "We just need a little compassion, a little more time." Ms. Phillips didn't even look up from her computer. "Mr. Carter, I've told you already, if you can't afford to live here, then you don't belong here." Her words were sharp, slicing through the last thread of dignity he had left. Emma, sensing her father's pain, stepped forward. "We'll be good, Mum," she said softly. "Daddy works really hard. Please don't make us leave." For the first time, Ms. Phillips glanced at the child. But instead of softening, she scoffed, "This is not about feelings, little girl. Your father doesn't meet the requirements." Daniel clenched his fists, fighting back the urge to lash out. He was about to gather Emma and leave when the glass doors of the lobby slid open. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped in, his presence commanding immediate attention. Conversation stopped. Even Ms. Phillips straightened in her chair, her confident air faltering for a moment. The man's eyes landed on Daniel and Emma. A smile broke across his face, a warm, genuine smile that made Emma tilt her head curiously. Without hesitation, the man walked straight toward them. And to everyone's shock, he bent down, wrapped his arms around Daniel, and said, "It's been a long time, my friend." Daniel froze in disbelief as the tall man hugged him. He hadn't felt that kind of warmth in years, not since his wife passed. Emma looked up at her father, her big eyes full of questions, while the manager's jaw nearly hit the floor. "Mr. CEO, she stammered. "Sir, I didn't expect." The man ignored her, pulling back slightly to look Daniel in the eyes. "Daniel Carter," he said, his voice rich with recognition. "You don't remember me, do you?" Daniel shook his head, embarrassed. The man chuckled softly. "It's Michael Hayes. We worked together years ago at the construction site. You taught me how to handle a drill properly, remember? I was a clueless intern, and you saved me from quitting." The memory came rushing back. Daniel's face softened, and he gave a weak laugh. "Michael, that was, 10 years ago?" 13, Michael said, smiling. Then his gaze shifted to Emma. "And who's this beautiful young lady?" Emma clung shyly to her father's leg. Daniel placed a protective hand on her back. "This is Emma, my daughter." Michael crouched down, his eyes warm. "Well, hello, Emma. You know your dad's a hero in my book." Emma's cheeks flushed as she hugged her bunny tighter. Behind them, Ms. Phillips cleared her throat, clearly irritated by being ignored. "Sir, this man has been behind on payments. He doesn't belong in this building." Michael stood slowly, his expression changing from warmth to something sharper. He looked at her with the kind of authority only a true leader could wield. "Ms. Phillips, you've made a mistake. This man belongs here more than anyone." The tension in the lobby was so thick that even Emma could sense it. She squeezed her father's hand, whispering, "Daddy, is he really your friend?" "Yes, sweetheart," Daniel whispered back, though his voice trembled with disbelief. Michael placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "I'm not just the CEO of this building complex, I own the company that built it. And if anyone deserves a place here, it's you." Ms. Phillips stepped forward, her face tightening. "But sir, policies are policies. If we make exceptions, tenants will start taking advantage." Michael cut her off. "An exception? You call helping a hard-working single father an exception? Let me remind you, Ms. Phillips, that our company's mission has always been about people first. If you can't understand that, perhaps you don't belong here." The words struck like thunder. The other tenants in the lobby, who had been silently watching, began to whisper among themselves. Some nodded in agreement. Daniel swallowed hard, overwhelmed. "Michael, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Michael replied gently. "Let me do what I should have done years ago, help someone who once helped me." He turned to the stunned crowd and declared, "From this moment on, Daniel Carter and his daughter will not only keep their home here, they will never face eviction threats again." Emma gasped, tugging on her dad's sleeve. "Daddy, did you hear that?" Tears welled in Daniel's eyes as he crouched to embrace her. "Yes, baby, I heard." That night, Daniel sat by the window of their apartment, watching Emma sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. His mind raced with gratitude and disbelief. Michael Hayes, the CEO of one of the city's largest companies, had stood up for him like a brother. A knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find Michael standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said with a smile. Daniel chuckled, accepting the cup. "You didn't have to do this. You've already done more than I could ever repay." Michael walked in, looking around the modest apartment. "You kept your word, didn't you? You promised your wife you'd take care of Emma." Daniel froze, his throat tightening. "How did you?" Michael's eyes softened. "You mentioned it back then, when we worked together. You said you'd do anything for your family." "I never forgot." Daniel sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the memory of his late wife. "Some days, I don't know if I'm strong enough." Michael put a firm hand on his shoulder. "You are. I've seen men give up over far less. But you're still standing. That makes you stronger than you think." For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt hope stirring in his chest. The following week, whispers about what had happened spread quickly throughout the building. Neighbors who had once avoided Daniel in the hallways began greeting him warmly. Some even offered to help with Emma, babysitting while he worked. For years he had felt invisible, like he didn't belong. Now, suddenly, people saw him. But Ms. Phillips wasn't done. Humiliated by the CEO's public reprimand, she began looking for ways to make Daniel's life miserable. Subtle things at first. Misplacing his maintenance requests, ignoring his calls. And then, quietly hinting to other tenants that he was getting special treatment, Daniel noticed the shift in some neighbors' eyes. Not all smiles were genuine anymore. One evening, as he walked Emma home from school, he overheard the tenants whispering, "He doesn't deserve to stay here." The CEO only helped him because of pity. The words stung, but Daniel held Emma's hand tighter and kept walking. At home, Emma asked, "Daddy, why are people saying mean things about us?" He knelt down, forcing a smile. "Sometimes, sweetheart, when people don't understand someone else's struggle, they make up stories. But you and I, we know the truth." Still inside, Daniel wondered how long he could withstand the quiet war brewing around him. The days grew heavier. Daniel tried to focus on his work and Emma's happiness, but the whispers in the building gnawed at him. One evening, he came home to find a note slipped under his door. "You don't belong here. Go back where you came from." His stomach turned. He quickly crumpled the paper before Emma could see it, hiding the pain behind a smile, but Emma noticed anyway. She climbed onto his lap later that night and pressed her tiny hand against his chest. "Daddy, does your heart hurt?" she asked softly. He pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her hair. "Sometimes it does, baby. But having you here makes it better." Meanwhile, Michael was busy running a company, but never forgot about Daniel. He checked in often, dropping by with groceries or surprising Emma with little books. His presence was like a shield against the growing hostility in the building. Yet, Ms. Phillips' resentment only deepened. She had lost control once, and she wasn't about to lose face again. One afternoon, Daniel returned from work to find the locks on his door tampered with. Furious, he stormed down to the manager's office, only to find Ms. Phillips waiting with a smug smile. "Must have been a mistake with the maintenance team," she said coldly. "I'll have it fixed eventually." Daniel's patience snapped. "You can't keep doing this. I've done nothing wrong." Her eyes glinted with cruelty. "Wrong? Your very presence here is wrong. People like you drag this place down. And when the CEO grows tired of you, don't expect anyone else to protect you." Daniel's fists trembled at his sides. He wanted to scream, but Emma's laughter echoed faintly from the hallway, reminding him what was at stake. He turned and walked away, swallowing his anger like bitter medicine. That night, he wrote a letter to Michael but tore it up before finishing. He didn't want to appear weak or dependent, but the battle lines had been drawn, and deep down, he knew Ms. Phillips wasn't done. The following week, Michael invited Daniel and Emma to his office. Emma's eyes grew wide at the towering skyscraper, its glass walls glittering in the sun. "Daddy, it looks like a castle," she whispered. Inside, Michael greeted them warmly. "I wanted you both to see where I spend my days," he said. Emma ran to the huge window, pressing her nose to the glass. Daniel looked around, feeling out of place among the leather chairs and polished wood. "Why bring us here?" he asked cautiously. Michael leaned forward, his tone serious. "Because I want to help you more than just keeping a roof over your head. I know what you're capable of. Daniel, you shouldn't be killing yourself in a warehouse. You have skills, dedication, and heart qualities I'd be proud to have on my team." Daniel blinked, stunned. "Are you offering me a job?" Michael smiled. "Not just a job. A chance to rebuild." For the first time in years, Daniel felt a spark of possibility. But doubt quickly followed. Could he really step into a new world after so long surviving on scraps? Daniel accepted the offer, though fear gnawed at him. His first day in the office felt like stepping onto a different planet. Suits and ties, meetings in glass rooms, conversations filled with words he hadn't used in years. He felt clumsy, out of place. That evening, as he tucked Emma into bed, she asked, "Did you like your new job, Daddy?" He hesitated, then kissed her forehead. "It was hard, sweetheart, but hard things make us stronger." Days turned into weeks. Slowly, Daniel learned, adapted, and found confidence again. Michael became more than a boss, he became a mentor. And Emma thrived, seeing her father come home with a light in his eyes she hadn't seen before. But beneath the surface, Ms. Phillips was plotting. She had connections, and whispers of Daniel's special treatment began reaching other executives. Her plan was simple: make Daniel look like a burden to Michael's company and force him out for good. It began with rumors. A mistake on a report that Daniel hadn't even handled was suddenly pinned on him. A meeting he wasn't invited to was later used against him, accused of neglecting responsibility. The tension mounted until one afternoon, he was called into the office of a senior executive, a stern man named Mr. Lawson. Daniel, Lawson said coldly, "Your performance is under review. There are concerns about your qualifications. Perhaps it was premature to bring you on." Daniel's heart sank. He wanted to protest, but he could already see the trap closing in. Miss Phillips' fingerprints were all over this. That evening, he sat in the dark, staring at Emma asleep on the couch, a coloring book still in her lap. He whispered to himself, "I can't lose this chance." Not again. The next morning, Daniel arrived early, determined to prove himself. He pored over reports, stayed late, and even took work home. Michael noticed, quietly proud but also worried about the weight on his friend's shoulders. One evening, Michael invited Daniel to dinner. "You don't have to kill yourself to prove anything," he said. "You don't understand," Daniel replied, his voice tight. "This isn't just a job. This is my last chance to give Emma the life she deserves." Michael leaned back, studying him. "Then let's face this together. If someone's trying to sabotage you, we'll find out who." But Daniel already knew. And he also knew that exposing Ms. Phillips wouldn't be easy. Emma's school held a father-daughter event that weekend. For the first time in years, Daniel showed up not as the exhausted, worn-out parent, but as a father with pride. Emma clung to his arm, beaming as they danced together. Michael attended too, as a guest sponsor, and he couldn't help but watch the way Emma's eyes sparkled around her father. "She's your reason," he whispered later. Daniel nodded, his throat too tight to reply. But just as life seemed to brighten, another storm loomed. Ms. Phillips had arranged a meeting with the board, presenting evidence that Daniel's employment was favoritism and a misuse of company resources. The boardroom was filled with tension. Ms. Phillips, with a stack of papers in hand, painted Daniel as an unqualified liability. "We must maintain standards," she insisted. "Allowing someone like Mr. Carter to bypass procedure sets a dangerous precedent." Daniel sat silently at the end of the table, shame washing over him. He could feel the weight of the executive's stares, some skeptical, others already convinced. Then Michael stood, his voice calm but firm. "What Ms. Phillips calls favoritism, I call faith. This man is more qualified in heart and integrity than half the people in this room. He knows struggle, resilience, and loyalty. Those are qualities I value above polished resumes." The room fell silent. Daniel's chest tightened with emotion. For once, someone was fighting for him, truly fighting. The board remained divided, but Michael's authority carried weight. The decision was postponed pending review. Ms. Phillips fumed, her plan unraveling. That evening, Daniel thanked Michael. "You don't know what this means to me." Michael shook his head. "You don't owe me thanks. Just keep proving to yourself, not to them, that you belong." Daniel nodded, though the doubt still lingered. At home, Emma sensed his unease and pressed her cheek against his chest. "Daddy, remember what Mommy used to say. We can do hard things." Her words pierced him like sunlight through clouds. Determined, Daniel worked harder than ever. He spearheaded a project to improve housing access for struggling families, drawing from his own experience. His proposal was practical, heartfelt, and innovative. When he presented it, even Lawson couldn't hide his grudging respect. But Ms. Phillips wasn't finished. She began digging into Daniel's past, searching for anything to discredit him. Old debts, late payments, even a minor mistake from years ago. She planned to expose it all at the next board meeting. Daniel braced himself, knowing his past wasn't spotless. But he also knew one thing: he wasn't the same man anymore. The day of reckoning came. Ms. Phillips stormed into the boardroom, armed with documents and venom. She laid everything bare, every flaw, every mistake from Daniel's past. "This is the man you want representing our company," she sneered. Daniel sat silently, hands clenched. Shame threatened to crush him, but then he felt Emma's drawing in his pocket a son, their apartment, and the words "me and Daddy forever." He stood, voice steady. "Yes, I've failed before. I've been broke. I've been late on bills. But I never gave up, because I had a little girl who needed me. And I'll keep fighting, no matter how many people tell me I don't belong. That's who I am." The room went silent. Even Ms. Phillips faltered. Michael rose beside him, This, he said, gesturing to Daniel, is exactly the kind of man this company should stand behind. Not perfect but resilient, and if we can't support people like him, then what is our mission worth? The board voted. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. Daniel would not only keep his job, his project proposal would move forward. For the first time, Daniel felt the weight lift. He had faced the truth of his past and stood tall anyway. Ms. Phillips was quietly removed from her position weeks later. Officially, it was policy misalignment. Unofficially, everyone knew she had overplayed her hand. Daniel, meanwhile, flourished. His housing project gained traction, earning recognition across the city. Families who had been overlooked finally had a voice. And through it all, Emma remained his anchor, her laughter filling the spaces where despair once lived. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the sunset, Emma asked, "Daddy, are we safe now?" He hugged her close. "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe, and we're home." Months later, Daniel stood at a podium, addressing a room full of city leaders, employees, and families. Emma sat in the front row, her eyes shining with pride. "This journey hasn't been easy," Daniel began. "I've faced judgment, hardship, and loss. But I've also discovered that strength isn't about never falling, it's about getting back up. And none of us have to stand alone. Sometimes, help comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes, a stranger becomes family." Michael stood in the crowd, smiling. Emma clapped wildly, shouting, "That's my daddy." The room erupted in applause. Daniel's eyes brimmed with tears as he realized the truth. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was living and leading. And in that moment, he knew his wife's promise was fulfilled. Emma was safe, loved, and surrounded by hope.